Hello, everybody. This is Tariq L1, and today we'll go over the concept of VLANs. What exactly VLAN? Well, we have a network. That network has hundreds or thousands of devices. Most of you, I believe all of you, I hope so, that you understand the concept of broadcasting. Broadcasting when a device wants to send a message to all the devices on the network. So when you have thousands of devices on one network, or what we call it one segment, you send a frame to thousands of devices. And big network, tens of thousands of devices. That's create resources consumptions, bandwidth, which is reflect on the performance of the network. So what you have, delay. So what we came up with, what we call it in networking, segmentation. The idea of VLAN is breaking a big network into smaller segments. So when I send a broadcast, I have a network which has 3,000 devices. Those 3,000 devices, if I break them into 3 VLANs, so each VLAN right now has 1,000 devices. If I break them into 6, it become every VLAN has 500 devices only, and so on and so on. Okay, so what's can you give us an example? Yes, let me. If we have, let's say you have a building. That building has floors. And each floor has different type of employees. Let's pick 3 of them or 2 of them or 4 of them, whatever it is. Let's assume that we have IT people. They work in most of the floor, or let's say all the floor, whatever you like. Then we have HR people. They work as well in different floors and so on. Then we have accounting people or academic, whatever you call them. Feel free. So what we do exactly, instead of sending a message to all the whole building, which is the broadcast, what we do exactly, we collect or we group those link, like those ones together, and those ones together. Really? Yes. And sure, the red ones as well. And we call those ones VLANs. So I can grab the employee, the department employee, I can grab them together regardless of their location. So the main concept, or if you want to define what is VLAN exactly, grouping devices based on functions, not locations. Group devices based on functions and services, regardless of their location. So I can group the IT people, regardless of their floors, together, the HR together, the business together, and so on and so on. That's how it is. That's how it is. How we do that usually? Well, easy. It is easy. What we do exactly, you have a switch. Let's assume that, let's take another color. That's the switch, and the switch usually has multiply of 24 ports. What we do exactly, we come to the switch and we allocate bunch of ports to the first VLAN. And we usually, let's say we name it IT. We can name the VLANs as an IT. However, we prefer to give when we configure, we prefer to give the VLANs a number. So we have numbers from 1 until 1024, then we have from 24 up to. We will cover that later on. So let's say that I'm gonna keep that as a VLAN 10, another VLAN, another ports, bunch of ports, VLAN 20, other ports, VLAN 30, and then we get some devices, those PCs, whatever. So for example, I can take those PCs and link them to either one switch or multi-switches, which you will see that. Then those ones to the other ports, then the green ones or the blue ones to the 31. So can we demonstrate that in, let's say, that Cisco 2960 device? That's 24 ports. What we do exactly if you want to do something like that, easy as that. Let's say this is VLAN 10, we allocate the ports from 1 to 8, VLAN 20 from 9 to 16, VLAN 30 from 17 to 24. Like that, yes. Then we come over here and we pick some PCs, some laptops, some whatever you like. And we start link them to here. From 1 until 8, that's VLAN 10. From 9, this is VLAN 20. And from here to any ports, that's VLAN 30. Really, yes. And if we have more than one switch, we can do something like that. And we link them together as well. However, how that works exactly? Well, when you go through the VLAN, the VLAN first has some advantage, some benefits. So what are the benefits first from the VLAN? I mentioned that it has some parts of decreasing the broadcasting. So limiting the broadcasting. Done. So when I limit the broadcast or reduce the broadcast on a network, broadcast means you're sending a frame through the network. So if I decrease that, what's in for me? What's in for the network? Better performance. So less bandwidth, less non-traffic bandwidth, it means that better performance. What else? Security. And that's most important. Most security means like we isolate department from one another. What do you mean by that? This is department, for example, this is the IT department, this is the HR department, this is the sales department. Although they are located in different floors, however, the IT, they can talk to each other and they can send data to each other, and their frames isolated, not physically, isolated from the other ones, the other department. So VLAN 10, the IT people, they can send data to each other. VLAN 20, the same thing. VLAN 30, the same thing. Really, yes. So they talk to each other without need for layer 3 device. Okay, so what about if, which means through the switch, layer 2 device? What about if VLAN 10 want to talk to VLAN 20? So now we need the router or layer 3 device as a switch. So 3560, let's say, a layer 3 switch as well. So how it works? So how the switch knows that this frame belong to VLAN 10. That frame belong to VLAN 20. That frame belong to VLAN 30. How they know that? How the switch know that? Well, we have an approach done by the switch itself to mark frames. So really, yes, we call that tagging. So the switch, a frame coming from VLAN 10, the IT department. So the switch will tag that with a number 10. Really, yes. The other ones, number 20, number 20, number 30, number 30. If you want to see that, how it works exactly, that's the switch. And this is another switch, let's say, and between here, the cables. You can see that there is different type of packet running here between the switch. I'm trying to simplify the concept to the maximum. In reality, there is no coloring, but we have tagging. So the switch from this side or the switch from that side, whichever, generate the frame. The frame usually has fields, source, destination, and so on. I'm going to show you in a minute. So what we do exactly, that's the normal frame. What the switch will do, the switch will come in the middle here and add a tag, another field here, and this will be used as a tag. And we use a specific protocol for that. You have configured that already before in the inter VLAN. If you still remember, we have used something like that, XQ, if anybody still remember, or X1.Q, the one you have used. That's the benefit of the VLAN, as we mentioned. That's not limited to, by the way, but the one which I usually focus on, the security, that's most important, and the performance. The other ones, the cost, whatever, it's okay, you can add more, whatever you like. What type of data VLANs we have? What type of VLANs we have? Well, we usually have different type of VLANs. We have data VLAN. We have the default one. Yes, the default ones. Let me show you here. If I take that switch, for example, that's the default VLAN, which is VLAN 1, usually. And as you can see, all the ports, before we do anything, totally, before we configure anything, you will find the default VLAN has all the ports already. After we configure VLANs and we assign specific port to those VLANs, you will find those numbers start decreasing. Whatever you assign, whatever the ports you assign it to the VLANs, you will find it that it start disappearing. So, for example, so if I want to create, as you can see here, I have only one VLAN. If I want to create VLAN, here it is, VLAN 20. And sure, you can give it name, by the way. So now what I have 3 more VLANs. Okay, then we assign, you will learn that, by the way. We assign specific ports, whatever the ports you want to assign it to VLAN 10, whatever the ports you want to assign it to VLAN 20, and so on and so on. And whatever the device you link it to that port, it become automatically under that VLAN. That's how it is. That's it, and nothing else. If you want to add VLAN, as you can see, it's easy. You just only VLAN number. If you want to delete any one of them, the same command. But for example, if I want to delete, this is VLAN 10, 20, 30. If I want to delete VLAN, just put the same command and no VLAN, whatever it is. So you can see that number 10 has gone. That's the default one. What else? Oh, we have the native one. What is that native one? All right, here it is. Now you have mentioned that between the switches, that's switch number 1, switch number 2, you have packets or frames. Let's say frames going between switch number 1 and switch number 2. Those frames has tags. So the switch right now knows that which one goes, it will go to which VLAN. Here is the question. What about if I have untagged frames, which is frames do not belong to any VLANs. So the switch, yes, I can create. I don't have to create all the ports on a switch for VLAN, by the way. I can create 15 of them and I'll leave the other 9s without. Really, yes, that we can do that. So not all the ports on the switch must be VLANs or VLAN ports. Yes, that's true, by the way. So if I have a device, PC linked to a switch, and that PC is sending data, that PC do not belong to any VLAN. How the switch deal with? That's the native VLAN. So no tagged, no number, no VLAN allocating frame, it goes to the native VLAN. And by default, before we configure anything, it usually VLAN 1. What about that management VLAN? What is that? Well, you have learned and you done some configuration of the switches, include the SPI, which is if I want to manage the switch, assume that I want to remote into the switch. Sure, we want to remote securely using, for example, SSH or any secure protocol. How we remote? We need at least an IP address. So what we do exactly, here it is. What I have here as interfaces, you can see that the interface is from 1 to 24, then the gig 01, gig 02, and the VLAN number 1. That's it. That's it. So now if I want to manage the switch, the device. What I do. Some people they said used VLAN one number one. Yeah, but everybody knows that I can, if I use VLAN number one, that means it's gonna be easy task for the hackers. So what we do exactly, we start configure. I can I can create an interface and give it any number I want to, and I can give it IP address. For example, it is whatever the IP address. It depends on what you want exactly. Then when you go back again, you will find something over here called VLAN 99. And we usually use that VLAN for device management, especially if you have what we call it switched network, which is a big, massive network, mostly based on switches. The data VLAN, the voice VLAN, and so on, that's VLAN, which is provide services. And one of the approach we usually do when we have big company or big corporate, whatever, and we usually have, let's say, um, conference rooming or some sort of zooming or and we want to create, we have applications for voice or videos, whatever, so we create a separate VLAN. Why is that? Because usually we have something called priority or under quality of service. So to tell the switches that this is high priority frame, we have to have a priority inside. So I don't want to delay because the switch, when it pass, data pass by, you have different type of frames. If I treat all the frames equally, it's going to be a problem with the voice. When you do a phone call or whatever from your company, you will have cuts. So what we do exactly, we tag those ones as well with what we call it priority. So we create separate VLAN and we give it high priority. So when you make phone call in the company, when you make like video conference or whatever, it has high priority. What we do exactly to configure the device. I just want to make sure that to understand this concept, if I'm using, this is a switch, which is, you will see that that's switch number one. Switch number one has devices. This one belongs to VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. That one, and let's say add as well VLAN 30. Then another switch over here, that's switch number two, that's VLAN 10, VLAN 20, and VLAN 30. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, by the way, but for the sake of the demo only. So now, between both of those devices, there is a link. Okay, so first, how the switch right now send the data from here to here, and switch number one will tell switch number two that's VLAN 10, that's VLAN 20, that's VLAN 30. And how that interface, which is this one, for example, if we assume that fast 0, 1, and this one as well, fast 0, 1. If we assume that this interface, how that interface knows that this is VLAN 10, 20, 30, whatever it is, okay, that's from the tags. So how differentiate between all of them, how to carry different data, we have to configure that interface as trunk. And this one Could be trunk, could be not, but we prefer sure to have trunk. I'm gonna explain that to you at the end of the lecture, but we can configure that manually to become trunk right away, like that. Or we can configure one side and we leave the other side for auto configuration, or what we call it desirable mode. But anyway, so when you configure a port as a trunk, we tell the switch that that port will be able to carry different VLAN frames. So if you haven't configured that, can I send the data from switch 1 to switch 2? No. So to be able to send the data from switch number 1 to switch number 2, which you have multi VLANs, the ports which carry the data usually must be trunk. Here it is. And the port which link those from the switch to the device or to the PC must be the mode access. I believe you have done that already, but just only to get the concept. So the device linked to the end, the port which is linked to the end device must be access, and the ports between the switches or the carry out of the switch must be trunk or auto or desirable, whatever it is. However, we prefer to have manually both sides as trunk to make it easy for you not to troubleshoot much. What else? We use the protocol, the 8021Q, the one you have done before. I hope that you still remember those ones. Tagging, probably that's the tag. This is the original Ethernet frame, by the way. And as you can see here, that's the destination MAC, the source MAC, the type, the length. We came over here and we fit a switch. Will fit between those ones extra field, extra tagging fields. And within that tag, we put over here the Ethernet type, the identifier, and this is the most important for us, the identifier, that's the VLAN number. So when the frame goes onto the switch will look over here, what the number is, send it to the assigned VLAN. What is the native VLAN, as I explained to you? The voice tagging. This is another area which I believe that I like explain to you more within part 2. So let's pause for a few minutes, then we will come back with the second part. Now let's go back to the categories of the VLANs. Well, we categorize the VLANs into what we call it the normal range and the extended range. The normal range usually from 1 to 10005, which is, I believe, that's the most used for us. It has many advantage, as we mentioned to you over here, that's we can save that in the flash. It is advertised, what we call that advertised. The extended range one, it's much more advanced, but much more complicated, and that's we use that for the big networks. One of the issues with the VLANs, the extended VLANs do not advertise by itself. So you have to do something with the DTP, the dynamic protocol, so to be able to advertise. This one, we can save it into the NVRAM. One of the good thing as well, it's not included in your material here, but with the extended one, with the extended VLANs, we can create multi-sub interface within one single VLAN. So usually you have learned that the normal one, you have learned that to create different VLANs, but each one has sub interface for each VLAN. Now, with the extended one, we can create multi sub interfaces for one VLAN, one single VLAN. However, the most one we use from 1 until 10005. That's the most use. How we create the VLANs, that's as I show you, that's very easy. How to assign ports, that's much easier as well. If you have done something just only once or twice, as soon as you do it once or twice, you will find that it's become really easy. Let me just show you over here. And can you see that I have here VLAN 20, VLAN 30. I'm going to create another VLAN as it was before. That's VLAN 10. Now, if I go back here, you will find that now I have 3 VLANs. Okay, so now let's assume that I want to have some specific ports to some specific VLANs. Right, no problem. So I'm configuring devices number 2, and I will go over here. Let me just show you here the labels so you guys can see which port we are using. I'm gonna get 2 or 3 PCs here, another one here, and I will link them to different ports and we assign ports. For example, I want to assign this one. That's number 1. Yes, here it is. And that's number 11. And that's number 21. Okay. I want to assign this one into VLAN 10, this one into VLAN 20, this one into VLAN 30. How we do that exactly? Easy as that. The first thing over here which is highly important, this is here. The first thing to do before anything, to create the trunking. So for example, which interface I'm going to be trunking right now, the fast 0, 2. So here it is. It becomes trunk. That's it. That's it. Very easy as that. Extra configuration will require for something else. But for now, this one to turn it into a trunk. One single line of code. Now, I want to assign those ports into different VLANs. Easy. So here it is. That's the first one. I want to put this one into VLAN 10, for example. So first, I want to put it as the access mode. Here it is. That's it. That's it. So now, now that VLAN, that PC right now belong to VLAN 10. And if I go back over here, just make sure to see that, you will see that VLAN 10 right now, that port, that PC right now belong to VLAN 10. And you can do that with others one as well. The same thing. Here it is. And later on, you will learn as well, if you have here, you can use the range to assign multi-interface or ports at the same time. So you don't have to code one by one, sure. So you can, for example, I want to configure from 1 to 10. Yes, range from 1 to 10 and the same command, only one command. That's it. That's it. So, and the one you create, the one you do create, anything you created from here, that's VLAN 1. You see that it disappeared from VLAN 1. This is VLAN 11. You can see that it disappeared from here. So whatever we take as ports to be assigned to a VLAN, it disappeared from the native VLAN or the default VLAN, whatever it is. What else? That's how to assign ports, how to show ports, changing the VLAN membership. That's not nothing. Deleting VLANs. One of the issue here, which I want to show you as well, that's the trunking. If that's the switch port trunk, and this is the one which is one of the really areas, the native VLANs. What is the issue with that? When you configure the trunking, the allowed native, the allowed VLAN which you pass through the data, you want to allow some specific VLAN to cross over. You assign in that switch, the VLAN is 80. Then you assign in that switch, the VLAN is 81. You will find that error, and that's a really famous error. One of the main things sometimes, like actually your code is correct, don't get me wrong, but when you have two switches linked like that, and you start to configure, you put all the configuration here first. On the first one, you put the native VLAN here, and you start to find that there is an error coming on the system. So that's not an error yet. Don't consider that an error. Why is that? Because you haven't configured the other side. So as soon as you configure the other side correctly, you will find those message, which is the error mismatch. That's a very famous troubleshooting error usually happen. So if you configure both of them, if you have configured both sides of the link for the native VLAN and you still have mismatch, that means you do have an error. But if you configure one side only and you get the message, that's not actually an error in reality. I believe that we cover most of what we need to go through. One issue here, which is if you don't want to configure like if the both side, I don't want the both sides to be trunk. So this one trunk, this one trunk. That's the idea. That's the one we usually prefer to do. Manual, trunk from this side, trunk from that side. So what about if I change this one into this one is trunk and left this one without. What my option? Do we have any other options? Well, the dynamic trunking protocol, which is the DT, we can leave that for the devices to negotiate. The Cisco 2960 and 3560, the two type of switches, which is, I believe you familiar, that's the 2960, and over here the switches, which is 3560. This one, that's layer 3, that's layer 2. Both they can work with DTP and they can negotiate. And you can see that if I change one of those ones right now, this trunk and this is non-trunk or auto or desirable, whatever it is, the mode, you will see that the orange color start negotiating for a while, then they come to negotiation terms. What are those options? Here you can see that you don't have to memorize that, by the way, but just make sure that to get this one. When you have how to read this one exactly, the dynamic auto with dynamic auto, that's give you access. If you have dynamic auto with desirable, that's trunk. Dynamic auto with trunk, it give you trunk. Dynamic auto with access, take access, read it from the other side. Dynamic desirable with dynamic auto give you trunk, and so on. You can see that when trunk with trunk give you trunk right away, when access with access give you access right away, the two sides. So other than that, you need to, if you miss one of those ones, if you configure one side of trunk and the other side, you need to look at the other side. This one is trunk, but the other side is dynamic auto, it's gonna give me trunk. This one is trunk, but the other side is dynamic desirable, it's gonna give me a trunk. If this one trunk and give you the trunk, it give you trunk, like this. As you can see that when I configure one side of trunk, the other ones with negotiation, mostly it's gonna be trunk in the three options. I believe that's most of what we want to cover for that area. I put you some videos, I put you some other materials on Canvas to help you out to understand as well. Go over the materials, and if you need any help or if you stuck with anything, if you struggle with any concept, please get back to me. You have my email. I'll be more than happy to explain more to you. Thank you for watching.